Good evening. I will be reading chapter 8 of part 2, which is Job's Laments from the book A Sacred Sorrow by Michael Card. Chapter 8 The Frustrated Lamenter. Not a single verse of the Old Testament forbids lamenting. In fact, later on, Jesus will bless those who do. Luke 6:21. One of the most helpful aspects of the paradigm Job provides us as a lamenter is the picture of his frustrated attempts to reach out to God despite the protests of his well-meaning friends. When we read the book of Job, we are usually trying to decide who is right. Better to understand Job as a person who seeks to lament, but who is interrupted again and again by his well-meaning friends. His heart tells him to go to God with his prayers of complaint. Our hearts tell us the same thing. Indeed, none of us need to be taught how to lament. What we need to hear is that we can lament. As the frustrating conversation continues between Job and his friends, as they parry back and forth between their theological condemnation and Job's righteous indignation, a subtle erosion begins to take place in Job's faith. When he enters into his suffering, it is with a blessing for God on his lips. Chapter 1, verse 21. After his health falls apart, Job asks his condemning wife, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Chapter 2, verse 10. Anyone who has come to this place will tell you this is a costly understanding. To say in essence, whatever comes my way, I will not let go of God, reveals a heart that can accept suffering as the undecipherable mystery that it is. After the arrival of his friends and their week of silence, the onslaught begins. Job will incessantly seek to cry out and lament to God, whom, as we have seen, he occasionally will boldly address as you. In addition to their insinuations that Job is suffering because of his sin, his friends try to shh Job's lamenting. According to their belief, such a conversation with God is blasphemy. This follows logically from their view of a God who is bound by the narrow equation of retribution. Would not such a God take vengeance on the arrogance of a person like Job, who challenges him to his face? "You subvert piety and restrain prayer to God," said Eliphaz, "that you could vent your anger on God and let such words come out of your mouth." But early on, Job insists, "I will not speak with restraint. I will give voice to the anguish of my soul. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul." 7:11. I insist on arguing with God. Chapter 13:3. God, the topic. Job desires a struggle by means of lament to God. He sees no other way out of the wilderness of his suffering, as indeed there is no other way out. His friends, who cringe at the apparent blasphemous passion of the language of his prayers, shift the conversation subtly in another direction. They begin to talk about God. He is reduced to a subject they would have Job believe they understand. Their discussions about God incessantly bring up Job's laments to God. The subtlety of the shift is disturbing. After Job's second lament, chapter 6, verse 1 to chapter 7:21, Bildad responds with the language of retributive justice, the initial equation again. Job almost seems to be caught off guard, and in chapter 9, verses 1 to 35, he leaves his lament and begins to theologize against his narrow notion of how God works in the world. What seems most significant to me is not the intellectual progress of their argument, but the simple fact that Job is being distracted away from God. He does not return to lamenting to God until chapter 10. Then Zophar appears, and the same process happens all over again. Before he returns to his important and difficult conversation, Job has to reason with Zophar, chapter 12:1 to 13:16. Again, he has stopped lamenting, and God is slowly becoming merely a topic of theological discussion, no longer the one to whom he was desperately reaching out. Eventually, however, Job limps back to lament in chapters 13 and 14. It is here that Eliphaz pronounces the most forceful diatribe against Job's lamenting. At this moment, Job tragically gives up his lament altogether. From now on, we hear only the lengthy responses from Job to their arguments. When he stops lamenting, Job ceases to reach out to God. He stops worshiping, no longer able to see that God is worthy to hear his case. What happened to Job happens to so many who come to such desolate places. Despair. Kierkegaard rightly called it the sin that leads to all other sins. Though it may seem profoundly counterintuitive, lament and despair are polar opposites. Lament is the deepest, most costly demonstration of belief in God. Despair is the ultimate manifestation of the total denial that he exists. Listen to the despair in Job's voice now as he moans, "Would that I knew how to reach him." Chapter 23:3. He is not there. 23:8. He is hidden. 23:9. I am terrified in his presence. 23:15. Not until chapter 30, verse 20, will Job attempt to cry out directly to God one last time, and then everything seems to have changed. The fight has all but gone out of him. All he can mutter is, "I cry out to you, but you do not answer." What friends should we fear? Could it be that Satan, having seen that death and disease would not be enough to force Job to let go of God, sent Job's friends, armed with an even more insidious weapon to attack him? Despair? Job's distraction should serve as a serious warning to all of us. His friends were wrong about God. God himself will say so, chapter 42, 7-9. But Job was wrong as well. He was wrong to be distracted, to take his eyes off the God he could not see and focus instead on his rationalizing friends. He was wrong to give up talking to God and resort to dialoguing with them about God. It was as close to the brink as Job ever came. But something seems to have held on to him in those last desperate minutes when he could no longer hold on for himself. Job calls out to those of you who are in the wilderness, "Beware." It could be that your undoing will not be caused by the death or the disease, by the cancer or the failed marriage. Your worst enemies could very well be disguised as your friends. This is how to know the difference. Your true friends will be willing to sit with you in silence, not for a week, but for as long as it takes. Your real friends will encourage you to keep talking, crying out to, arguing with God. And when you would be tempted to despair and quit the dance floor, saying that you simply lack the strength or the faith to go on, it is only your real friends who will have the love to leave you all alone with the one who desires above all to finish the dance with you.